If you're a copywriter and you're being told by different offer owners or your clients that your copy is falling flat, that it's not converting at what they're expecting, and that it's just not working very well, well, today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what you can learn outside of the copy sphere to understand the numbers and the data to be better able to help offer owners that you're working with understand that perhaps it's not the copy and perhaps there's other things at play causing your copy to flop. My name is Maria Sparagus and I work with thousands of 7- and 8-figure offer owners, and I help them with their payment systems and ensure that they're reliable and working well for their businesses. Today, I'm going to talk to copywriters and marketers in general. I think it is a very important thing as a marketer and as a copywriter to really understand some moving pieces about the business, to be able to understand what you can do to help the offer owners that you're working with, and to also ensure that you know the real results of your offer or the offer that you wrote. So I'm going to give you a real world example and something that recently came by my desk. And I was like, okay, this is actually something very important and something that all copywriters should know. So I have a friend who's a very successful copywriter, and he reached out to me telling me this exact story. He's like, hey, Maria, I'm working with a 7-figure offer owner, and, he's selling supplements, and my copy is really good. I know I've done some internal testing. I know that this is really a winning offer, but the offer owner keeps telling me that it's not converting at the rates that he's hoping. And obviously I'm not a copywriter. So at this point I'm like, well, what does he want me to do? So he actually said, I think it has to do with their merchant account and their payment processing. I think it's just not working very well because I'm seeing a lot of click-throughs to the checkout page, but then, the offer's falling flat. People are not buying. So that kind of piqued my curiosity. I said, okay, well, that's interesting, right? If you're seeing a lot of people get to the checkout page and then just not going through, their intention is that they want to buy, right? So it just doesn't make sense and something seems off. So my copywriter friend actually made me introduction to the offer owner. We had a quick chat. We looked through a few things and we realized that there are actually quite a few factors at play that could be causing an issue with the copy. Now, I do want to give this disclaimer. Obviously, if you're a copywriter or a marketer and you're working as a freelancer or providing advice to different offer owners, if they're telling you it's your copy, obviously review your copy. Make sure that, you have all your T's crossed and you're making sure that that's the best offer that you can put out and the best copy that you could put out. But if, you know a little bit more about the business logistics in general, it will be very helpful for you. And you can actually bring up a couple of things that perhaps the offer owner didn't think of. So first, let me focus on the main issue that I had identified with that offer owner, which is his merchant account. So we took a quick look just to try to gather some data. And it seems like his merchant account was only approving between 40 and 50% of the customers that were trying to check out, which is actually horrible. I mean, if 1 out of 2 people who are trying to buy from you can't because they're getting a decline from the merchant account, then obviously there's something wrong. We dug a little bit further to figure out, well, what are these decline messages about? So this is something to keep in mind. If you're seeing a decline rate of, 40, 50%, obviously, it's important to understand why there's declines. What are the reasons for the declines? Now, in this specific case, what happened is we were seeing a lot of issuing bank declines, which means that the ultimate customer's bank was declining the transactions for various reasons. Could be that the offer owner's category, like his business category, was tagged incorrectly. It could be they just maybe didn't have very good practices. I see this, a lot of merchants have, 3, 4, 5 upsells, just hitting up card one after the other. So obviously that's going to cause some issues with declines. You cannot take a credit card and within a matter of a minute hit it with 5 charges. It just doesn't work very well. So strategically planning your upsells is very, very important. Now, the other thing that's important, about this specific merchant is we were looking at the tech stack on the merchant account and the payment processing engines. And what I noticed is that this merchant has been sold pretty much every third-party service that they can add in order to help their merchant account. But in fact, they weren't really monitoring all these tools and they were just kind of all over the place. So let me give you a couple examples. There's something called 3D Secure, which is a very popular tool for fraud prevention in Europe. And somebody had convinced them that this was a good idea to add this on his cart in the US. It is a bad idea to add it on your cart in the US because most US customers are not used to this checkout flow and you don't want to add something that they're not used to. So 3D Secure is kind of like a 2FA and it gets done all the time in Europe when you're trying to buy something online, but it doesn't get done very often in the US. So, a lot of customers were confused, weren't getting the text message, didn't really know, they were just getting declined, they were moving on. Another thing that was happening as well is they were also being provided fraud prevention tools and fraud scoring tools. So these tools are actually really, really good. And if you have the infrastructure and the team to be able to understand these tools and implement them correctly, I say thumbs up, go ahead and do it and really, configure it to make sure that it works well for your business. But if you're taking an out-of-the-box tool, like for example, Count, Count, which is a fraud and transaction scoring mechanism for online transactions, and you're just popping it in there without any customization, it's not really going to work for your business model. It doesn't understand how many upsells you have, how many downsells you have, your maximum transaction, the regions that you're working in and where you're allowing customers to buy from. So if you don't actually customize it, and there are a lot of customizations and you have to always keep it up to date because you may be changing certain things about your business. So somebody really needs to be on top of it. So they were actually using this fraud scoring tool with an out of the box kind of setup, no personalization, customization. There was so many flags that were just there incorrectly that were causing so many false declines that, it just didn't make sense for that particular company to have. So if you have these types of tools and you're just, and your offer owner or your client is just putting a mishmash of these tools without anybody actually monitoring them, then that could be causing false declines. It could be causing a lot of just unnecessary declines. And that's what we found. So we actually took off all these tools. We just said, let's take these off. And all we did was add a chargeback mitigation tool. So a chargeback alert service. And that chargeback alert service, what it does is it warns you about potential chargebacks. So obviously, we're taking out all these things and changing stuff around. We wanted to add an extra security measure for chargeback prevention. And we saw pretty much immediately within 1 or 2 weeks, we saw an increase of about 5 to 7% in conversions just by removing all these tools that are supposed to actually help your conversions. So keep that in mind. Understand, you don't have to understand as a copywriter or marketer, especially if you're freelancing, the granular stuff that everybody's doing in their business, but it's important to kind of take note of these things and ask your client, are you using any fraud mitigation tools? Do you have anything set up in your gateway that may not be working? And then, perhaps get the help of somebody like me or my team in direct payment that we can kind of walk offer owners through this and see if there's anything that we can change or tweak in their cart in order to prevent false declines, right? Because this happens. So now, just to kind of summarize, it's important, if you haven't realized this so far, is to really understand the data. So understand what is your approval rate and what is your decline rate. And from your decline rate to really understand declines are happening for which reason. So it could be due to tech issues. It could be due to, for example, regional issues. Like if you are, for example, a US business and you're selling outside of the US, your conversions are not going to be very good. For example, if you're not accepting local currency. Let's give a real world example. This particular merchant was selling about 10% outside of the US, particularly to the UK, and he was not accepting payments in pounds. Well, especially when it's a major currency, you have to keep in mind, if I'm selling to Brits as an American business, Brits want to pay in pounds. They don't want to pay in US dollars. It causes them to get extra transaction fees, foreign transaction fees, and ultimately their bank will more likely decline the transaction because they don't want to have potentially a headache with risk. So it's always better to charge in a local currency if the market is big enough for you, and if it's a major currency, for example, euros, GBPs, and so on and so forth. So keep in mind, it's important to understand just kind of the basics of this, your declines, your approvals, and different tools that you can add and remove that can make a huge impact on conversions. And just because something sounds very good, like on a tech perspective, there's a lot of things in the payment sphere that are sold as, this will increase your conversions, this will get you more sales and so forth. Sometimes if you don't have somebody monitoring this tool or configuring this tool, it could actually cause more harm than good. So as a copywriter, it's important for you to ask some of these questions to make sure that at least on a payment processing standpoint, any customer who wants to buy is able to buy the product and service. Now, you're never going to get a 100% approval ratio. And it really all depends on the business type and the category and the ticket size and so forth. But, at 80% is about the average that you should be seeing if you're running a legitimate offer and you're doing things right on the payment processing side. Now, if we move along from payment processing, which is obviously my wheelhouse, but as I said, I work with tons of 7 and 8 figure merchants, and we go through so many iterations of their websites and how they can increase sales and so on and so forth. Something that I see very often that is problematic is traffic sources. For example, if you have adult traffic sources versus Facebook traffic source for an offer, obviously, your Facebook traffic source will probably convert a lot better than an adult traffic source. YouTube versus TikTok, all that stuff. Not all traffic sources are the same. They don't convert at the same rate, and you're not going to get the same results. So the important thing for you to know as a copywriter is, what are the traffic sources? Like, where is this offer owner getting his traffic, and how does each traffic source compare? So for example, if they have Facebook, if they have adult traffic, and then if they have TikTok traffic, well, which one's converting best? Which one are you getting the most sales from? Also important to know which one is perhaps generating more refunds and chargebacks, but that might happen later on. But if, for example, Facebook's doing really well and adult and TikTok are not, well, maybe your copy needs to be changed per traffic source. Or also, it's important to understand that adult traffic will never convert the same as Facebook. So it's just a lesser quality traffic. So it's important that the offer owner and you have a conversation on expectations on traffic. Also, affiliate traffic, it reacts differently. There's more risk with affiliate traffic, so you may get more refunds, more returns, more chargebacks, and so forth. So not all traffic sources are created equal, and there are definitely some that convert way better on specific offers than others. So if you, at least as a copywriter or marketer, understand, this is the conversion rate for this traffic source, this is a conversion rate for another traffic source, and that's for another one. First, what you can do is you can, try to double down or talk to the offer owner to double down on a traffic source that's yielding best results. And secondly, what you might want to do is you might want to adapt your copy for the traffic source, right? So, a TikTok user and a Facebook user are very different, right? A Facebook user is usually an older user, somebody who reads more longer form, watches longer form videos, whereas for a TikTok user, you may want to have something, for a younger demographic, shorter form, just more punchy and more to the point. So, that's the important thing, is that understanding the traffic sources and the conversion for each will help you not only adapt your offer better, but secondly, also, prove to your client that, hey, it's doing this on Facebook. It may not be doing this on that traffic source, but why don't we take my copy and put more money on Facebook as a traffic source for this particular offer, right? So whenever something's working, my personal opinion is just double down on what's working. There's no point in trying to crush TikTok traffic when Facebook traffic is doing so well for you. Might as well just take more of the budget and put it in there and, convert more sales and so forth. But, hopefully you're working with different companies that are willing to share some of this data with you. And it also has to come, as a copywriter, you need to come from a position of, a little bit of knowledge on the marketing side and on the operation side, so your customer can trust you and want to give you this data. So you have to explain to them that this will help your copy actually convert more and make them more money. And who doesn't want to make more money, right? So, you have to also not just try to get the data and ask for the data. You need to position it as to why you want this data and how it's going to help them ultimately if they share this data with you, because this is sensitive data and there may not all offer owners want to, give copywriters, especially if they're freelance, this type of information. So position it, explain it to them, and see how, perhaps you can get some numbers that will help you understand what's going on in the situation. Or at least what you can do is educate them, give them some of the examples that I've given you on traffic sources and payment processing that, could be problematic on an offer. And, at that point, they may trust you and may dig in a little bit further. Now, the last thing I really want to touch upon is really tech issues. This happens on a payment processing side. It also happens, on a traffic side, but there are tech issues really on the business side that could really affect, conversion rates and sales and so forth. And what I'm talking about really is, a CRM, a shopping cart connected to a gateway, connected to a payment processor. So if you don't know how this all works, it's really important to understand a transaction flow, like how your customer goes from finding the website to actually buying, every step that happens in between. There are a lot of different softwares that are connected here. And what can happen between software 1 to software 2 to software 3 is there could be a drop off, there could be something that's configured incorrectly and so forth. So in this particular case, for the client that I was talking to you about, they had a member management software connected to a shopping cart, connected to a gateway, connected to a processor. So, there's 4 parties, and then obviously the loop kind of goes back. Now for this client, one very kind of seems a little bit silly, but again, they didn't have anybody really digging into, the specifics of the gateway and the processor and the shopping cart and so forth. So they had a front-end product that was $69 a month, and then they had an upsell that was also $69 a month. So, obviously the problem with that is that it looked like a duplicate transaction. And on the gateway level, there is a setting that says if you see a duplicate transaction within 10 minutes, decline it. So upsell 1 wasn't doing very well, obviously because of this. So this is just little things. And I know I can probably enumerate 1,000 things that you could look at, but it's important to understand that all these softwares, are connected together through an integration, and the integrations are not always complete. So there are certain things that get dropped off that don't work well. And it's important to get a couple of test transactions and really look at what's happening with transaction 1, 2, 3, especially when you get a decline, and kind of go through it. One thing that I would advise you as a copywriter or a marketer working, in freelance, working with different clients, is test out the process yourself. You have to test out how it works. So ideally, what I do is I do it myself on 1 or 2 different browsers, because every browser could have a different iteration of an offer, and maybe it's not optimized depending on, let's say, a mobile browser, Chrome, Safari, and so forth. And then get a friend that is not in the industry, that doesn't actually do this, to buy the product or service. So obviously, you're going to have to refund them. I don't think your friends will want to start buying a whole bunch of stuff, but what would be important is get them to video themselves so they can do this on Loom, and have them go through the whole process. They'll probably be able to find quite a few tech issues or quite a few things that just are not in the right place. And that will help you a lot understand the customer journey. And that in turn, you can go back to your client and you can explain to them maybe some things, some CTAs that are missing, maybe some buttons that are not working, or maybe, on a customer experience standpoint, they're getting declined and they don't understand why. For example, there's a 2FA tag or something like that. So, if you do it yourself and also you have one other person do it, you're going to gather a lot of knowledge, and you'll be able to see if there's any technical issues behind the reason that, the offer is not converting as well. So I know this is a lot to digest, and this is, quite a short episode. And so I really tried to kind of summarize things. But if you have any specific questions, if you're a copywriter or a marketer and you're like, hey, Maria, this is the challenge that I'm having with this particular offer owner, I think, there's a problem on the tech side and so forth, drop me a line, let me know, and I'd be happy to kind of flesh out a topic a little bit more. But keep in mind, copywriting and your copy are very, very important, obviously, in the string of things when you're trying to make a sale. But there are so many other components that perhaps some offer owners are, discounting that may have a huge impact. So to close up this story, I've worked with that customer that my copywriter friend referred me, and we've increased conversion rates by 15% in about 60 days just by removing tools and tweaking a couple of things. So it is possible to make monumental changes in conversions by looking at all these issues that I mentioned above. If you'd like more information, feel free to drop me a line. I'm always looking for questions, and I'm always looking for challenges that you're having with payment processing and tech issues and how to convert more sales. So I hope to hear from you soon, and have yourself a great day.